There exists a civilization that has died many times, yet with each death it rose again, stronger, deeper, and it carved indelible marks into the memory of mankind. Athens, where even time bows its head, an ancient memory. From a forgotten land covered in dust and stone, Athens emerged as the cradle of philosophy, democracy, and art, the three pillars upon which Western civilization would be built. But behind its radiant glory lies a past saturated with pain, conquered, burned, and reborn time and time again through empires, through centuries. This is not just the story of an ancient city. It is the journey of an idea, of freedom, of identity, and of the unbreakable force of human intellect. In Athens, you don't just see ruins, you hear echoes. Fragments of a bygone era still whisper to us, not in words but in majestic silence. Step into Athens not to simply learn history, but to feel it. Some stories were never written. They survive only as echoes in the wind, brushing over ancient stones. Before writing, before the gods of Olympus had names, Athens already existed as a spirit, hidden in the mist and rock of pre. Around 7000 BCE, while much of humanity still wandered through forests in search of prey, this land witnessed the first deliberate footsteps of settlers. There was no glory, no legacy, only stone, fire, and an unyielding will to survive. And on the harsh, flat rock of the Acropolis, something beyond time began to take form. A space where gods and mortals would one. This wasn't merely a settlement. It was the first pulse of life in a city that would eventually reshape the fate of civilization. By the second millennium BCE, Athens slowly folded itself into a greater power. The Mycenaean civilization, one of Europe's first and most enigmatic empires. Under the unseen hands of ancient monarchs, Athens learned to carve into stone, forge bronze, build fortresses, and most importantly, it lacked the grandeur of Mycenae or Pylos, but Athens carried a quiet resilience. It absorbed culture, adopted myth, and waited, like a silent mountain, for its moment to. And no one could have predicted it. That from the ashes of fallen empires, this very city would one day define philosophy, politics, and art, the very foundations of what the modern world calls civilization. Athens was not born wearing a crown, but it was born with memory, and that memory has never truly. There was no thunderclap, no closing epic, just a morning when the ancient world awoke and realized everything was gone. Around 1100 BCE, the Mycenaean civilization, once the pride of ancient Greece, collapsed suddenly and mysteriously. Majestic palaces burned to ash, administrative systems crumbled, trade routes vanished beneath overgrown grass, and most devastating of all, writing disappeared. The memory of a flourishing age was erased, as if it had never been. Greece plunged into a darkness that lasted over 3 centuries, a time without books, without records, without kings or temples. All that remained were scattered rural villages, and myths whispered by fire. And yet in the heart of that destruction, Athens did not fall. It was no longer a hub of empire, no longer a beacon of power. Athens became a small, silent community tucked. No grandeur, no triumph, but most importantly, it endured. While other city-states were burned and forgotten, Athens somehow preserved an ember in the ashes. This was not an age of glory or conquest. It was an age of quiet endurance, and that very silence would become fertile soil. Centuries later, from this stillness, Athens would rise again, carrying with it philosophy. Perhaps the great civilizations of the past do not die by sword or fire. but when the world stops remembering them. But Athens never allowed itself to be forgotten. After 3 centuries submerged in darkness, Athens began to awaken, like lifeblood returning to a body that had nearly died. From the Phoenicians, Athens adopted an alphabet and began to rewrite its own identity. Athens had once been a kingdom, consuming the voices of the poor like a fire with no end. Draco carved the city's first law code into stone, so severe that even breathing wrong could earn you death. Solon erased debt slavery, reshaped society based not on birth but on wealth. He planted the first seeds of democracy in a soil soaked with injustice. Cleisthenes shattered the old bloodline's grip, created the Council of 500, gave the people ostracism. This was no longer just a city-state. It was the birthplace of a political system not born from mercy but from survival. There are moments in history that don't just change the fate of a city, they shake the future of humanity. In 490 BCE, on the plains of Marathon, a small Athenian army stood firm against the colossal force of the Persian Empire. They were crushed again, this time at Salamis, where Athenian ships sliced through the sea like blades, cleaving Xerxes' ambition in two. Athens didn't just survive, it rose as an empire. From the spearheads of Marathon's warriors to the soaring columns of the Parthenon, Athens entered its golden age. Under the leadership of Pericles, the city became a symphony of wisdom and beauty. The theater of Dionysus gave voice to both tragedy and comedy. And in a quiet corner of the Agora, a man named Socrates began to ask questions that would haunt and enlighten civilizations for millennia. This was no longer the Athens of war. This was the Athens of reason, of art, and of the soul, a place that didn't just defeat its enemies. It defied time. This was no longer the Athens of war. This was the Athens of reason, of art, and of the soul. A place that didn't just defeat its enemies, it defied time itself. Not all wounds come from the outside. Some empires are destroyed not by their enemies, but by the very things that once made them great. In 431 BCE, Athens, at the peak of its glory, entered a long and brutal conflict with its unyielding rival, Sparta. The war stretched on for nearly 30 years, and with each passing season, it ate away at the soul of Athens. Not with a single decisive blow, but through slow, grinding exhaustion, civil unrest, betrayals, famine. Athens, once the master of the seas, now a shadow of itself. The walls still stood, but the dream had crumbled. And then from the north, a new force emerged, Macedonia. Under the iron will of Philip II and later Alexander the Great, Athens was no longer a beacon. It became a subdued city, living in the memory of former light. Empires don't just lose land, they lose their voice. And from that moment on, Athens no longer led history. It merely whispered to the past. Athens had lost its crown, but it had not lost its soul. After the death of Alexander the Great, the city fell into the hands of his generals, men who carved up the world like new gods of a Hellenistic age. And so, Athens became part of the vast machinery of the Roman Empire. Beneath the steel shadow of Rome's emperors, there were those who bowed before the city's ancient light. Hadrian, a true disciple of knowledge, rebuilt libraries, raised temples, and gave Athens a place, not out of might but out of memory. Athens no longer spoke with decrees. It spoke through lectures, through marble, and through silence. Like a torch no longer burning bright, but still warm, it held the fire of the past for a world that was changing. And within those quiet walls, the echoes of Socrates, Plato, and the ancient arts have never truly gone silent. Some civilizations don't fall in fire. They fade into silence. When Constantinople rose as the new imperial capital of the Eastern Roman world, Athens, the beacon of knowledge, art, and liberty, was quietly reduced to a provincial town, a shadow living in the echo of its former brilliance. The great schools of philosophy, once echoing with the voices of Socrates and Plato, were shuttered. Ancient pagan temples where Greeks once prayed beneath the gaze of Athena were repurposed into Christian churches, scrubbing clean the remnants of a golden age. No more debate, no more theater, no more reason. And then came the storms. Wave after wave of barbarian invasions, Goths, Normans, and others, swept through Athens like floods through forgotten ruins, leaving behind chaos, looting, and decay. For nearly 1,000 years, this city did not shape history. It merely existed within it, like a crumbling monument etched in the broken memory of time. Athens was not burned to the ground like Troy. It was erased day by day by the slow cruelty of forgetting, and for any great empire, that is the most terrifying death of all. In that long solitude, the voice that once guided the ancient world became nothing more than a faint whisper rising softly from the scattered stones. Athens, once a place where myth and reason danced together, had become a puppet in the hands of history. After the Fourth Crusade in 1204, knights bearing the cross did not only sack the Holy Land, they brought blood and fire to Athens. The ancient city fell into the hands of Frankish lords, iron-helmed men who could not hear the lingering voice of Socrates still echoing in the marble. From that moment on, Athens became a queen locked inside a rotting castle, passed from one ruler to the next. The Catalans, the Italians, the Venetians. Each arrival carved a new wound into the body of the city. But the greatest pain came in 1458, when the Ottoman Empire descended like a shadow that blotted out the sun. The Parthenon, once the pinnacle of classical beauty, was turned into a mosque, crowned not by Athena's wisdom but by a foreign crescent. Then in 1687 came the final blow. A gunpowder explosion tore through its stone heart, reducing much of the temple to ruin. Athens wasn't just conquered, it was transformed against its will. And so Athens endured not as a city of gods, but as a ghost among conquerors. It wasn't the spear, it wasn't the torch. It was memory that rose first. Athens, once the city of gods, of Socrates and the Parthenon, had become a mute shadow under Ottoman rule. And yet, beneath weathered stones and shattered ruins, a flame still smoldered, waiting for its hour. In 1821, that hour came. The Greek War of Independence did not begin with modern armies. It began with a belief that the blood of Achilles still flowed in the veins of the people, that Athens had never truly died, only slept. Men with old rifles and burning hearts stood up, not to reclaim former glory but to take back their soul. Amidst gunfire, rubble, and sacrifice, Athens once again became a symbol, not of domination but of defiance. Blood was spilled, temples crumbled, but this time the Greeks did not fall. And then in 1833, Athens was liberated. A new gateway of history opened, and the city, still cloaked in ash and broken statues, was chosen as the capital of an independent kingdom, the Kingdom of Greece under King Otto. It was no longer an empire, no longer the center of the ancient world. But Athens had returned not as a ghost, but as a declaration that what is truly great can never be buried forever.